Yaps. It's in the name. All right. Damon Cassidy, he has it out. Why are boomers insist they had it harder than us? Doubtful. Their money went a lot further. One person in a relationship could have a full-time salary job and provide a full house, boat, vacation, 401k. Now we got two motherfuckers in a house and we barely can survive.
The Federal Reserve. Baby boomers, according to the Federal Reserve, baby boomers have officially become the richest generation to ever live.
For sure, their dollar went the absolute furthest. They could buy a house for $50,000 back in 1960, right? And that $50,000 house is now a $5 million house. And what did they do to work to gain that net profit? Absolutely nothing.
With a combined net worth of 4 times that of millennials. But despite...
Oh, did you guys ask for my unsolicited opinion on this topic? Well, too bad. Here's another episode of unsolicited advice from your boy Elrod. And I wouldn't say advice, it's just unsolicited opinions, baby.
The fact that no living generation will ever reach that level of wealth accumulation,
True.
Many boomers still believe they got the short end of the stick.
How?
With a conviction so strong, people are already attacking the premise of this video without even giving me a chance to explain. So why is the wealthiest generation in American history so convinced they lived a life of hardship? Following World War II, while both Europe and Japan faced the immense task of rebuilding from the war's catastrophic destruction, the industrial dominance...
In all fairness, before Damon gets into this, I do think that every generation thinks that they had it the hardest, right? Like the generation before them that fought in World War I, they're like, you guys had planes and trenches and sophistication. We didn't have none of that. If we wanted reconnaissance, we just had to send a mother trucker out and see which way his head exploded. And that way we knew what direction the bad guys were at.
The United States, combined with nearly 70% of the world's gold reserves, allowed it to emerge as the dominant force in the global economy. And as the U.S. accounted for half the world's industrial output, it was also backed by strong union representation and newly developed labor protections, which drove wages up by over 60% by the end of the war, allowing millions of soldiers to return home to a nation primed for economic growth, where between 1946 and 1964, 76 million baby boomers were born in the United States, an increase of nearly 50 million more children than the baby booms of the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia combined, setting the cultural expectation that the sheer size of the baby boom alone would guarantee continued American prosperity. But despite the baby boom being fueled by post-war economic expansion, where homeownership jumped from just 40% before the war to over 60% by 1960, it's crucial to understand that the majority of parents tasked with raising nearly half the nation's population had spent their own childhoods under a rigid and disciplinary model mirrored by the assembly line, as children contributed nearly 30% of household income leading up through the 1930s, where this live-to-work mentality was only compounded by the tasked with raising nearly half the nation's population, had spent their own childhoods under a rigid and disciplinary model mirrored by the assembly line, as children contributed nearly 30% of household income leading up through the 1930s.
And we're not talking about like just people with dwarfism, right? They just want kids.
Where this live-to-work mentality was only compounded by the psychological weight of the Great Depression, followed immediately behind the responsibility of defending the country throughout the Second World War. And while history would later come to label this period as the golden age of capitalism, for the parents living through it, it wasn't about prosperity. It was about figuring out how to raise a child in a world they didn't recognize, creating a parenting model fundamentally rooted in fear and unspoken rules, as they prioritized permanence, routine, and material stability, while attempting to resolve their own childhood traumas and anxieties through the lives of their children.
These boys greet their dad as though they are genuinely glad to see him, as though they had really missed being away from him during the day and are anxious to talk to him.
It's also like, how much do those kids actually know their dads if their dads are constantly out at work, and like the kid wakes up, the dad's already gone to work, the kid's going to bed, the dad's coming home from work. So it's like, how much time does that kid have to really get to know his own Faja?
Hundreds of thousands of parents to look for the aid of professionals to help mold what was increasingly seen as the perfect child, where Dr. Benjamin Spock's The Common Sense Book of Baby and Childcare became the defining voice of this movement, selling over 500,000 copies in just 6 months, second only to the Bible, where his philosophy emphasized a permission to be flexible, prioritizing emotional well-being and personal happiness over the strict disciplinary model their parents had experienced. However, this emphasis on flexibility and responsiveness was often twisted into permissiveness, where parents now believed they had the right to relinquish their authority and replace it with the pursuit of material goods, resulting in cultural movements where psychologists, educators, and even Eleanor Roosevelt encouraged parents to treat their children as adults, warning that if parents used too much discipline, it could lead to years of emotional damage. Where Lawrence Samuel, an American cultural historian, explained that Europeans who had taken jobs as camp counselors in the United States throughout the late 1950s were taken back by the brashness of American children. Campers were pseudo-mature and superficially self-assured, with respect given to adults only if the latter provided their worth. Having fun was pretty much all that mattered to these campers, with the descriptor spoiled coming up more than any other. American children were already highly materialistic, these counselors concluded, far more interested in things like cars, television, and business than their European counterparts. Parental love was expressed mostly by the means of things purchased for the campers, a stark contrast to the generational bond in counselors' own countries. With the New York Times stating, the overprivileged, overprotected, overindulged child of the oversolicitous parent may well grow up with problems as difficult to himself.
That's a lot of overprivileged, overprotected, overindulged, oversolicitous. That's a lot.
As those of the youngster who has had too few of the good things of life. Meanwhile, as the Cold War reignited the nation's growing fear of communist expansion, policymakers and educators began framing baby boomers not just as children to raise, but as a mass population to manage, arguing that a rapidly growing America would require greater centralization and government control at the expense of traditional values like autonomy and self-determination. As Robert Cook, director of the Population Reference Bureau, warned in Parents Magazine, how long will it be possible to maintain the American tradition of liberty for the individual in an increasingly crowded economy is another basic question, one for all.
When was this written? Like the 1960s? Well, apparently, how long does it last? 2025, because we're at the very end of it.
Americans to ponder. However, instead of national reflection, economist Walt Rostow, chief advisor to Kennedy and Johnson, outlined in his 1960 Cold War Manifesto, The Stages of Economic Growth, that the final goal of American development was not political liberty or individual autonomy, but high mass consumption, where he argued that technological innovation and material abundance, not population growth, would drive economic success, fundamentally shifting the economy to prioritize the short-term effects of the baby boomer size and future purchasing power, rather than establishing the jobs and systems needed not only for the boomer generation as they came of age, but for future generations to come, with teachers specifically being instructed.
I want to see what that headline says.
As they came of age, but for
Millennials and Gen Z have given up on finding fulfillment at work, as survey finds they're the least likely to care about enjoying their job. And speaking of somebody who has recently lost their job, and with no day's notice, just, hey, get a phone call, you're gone, effective immediately. It's because these corporations or the place that you work at don't respect you. Now, granted, I do feel like the employee sometimes takes the employer victim, but in most cases, these large corporations, if you're working for a Walmart, a Hershey's factory, like a Home Depot, they have so much control and governance over your life, and they have a fear. They have a fear of your job being removed, that like you being removed from your job at any point. And that anxiety that feeds up, it's like, no wonder we can't have fun at work. We're constantly anxious. Next week, am I going to have my job? Next week, am I going to have my job? Am I going to be? It's like that deteriorates the morale of the workforce. So if you want somebody to perform well, you want their morale high. You don't want them worried in the back of their head, am I going to lose my job?
Future generations to come, with teachers specifically being instructed to discourage individualistic thought and action by instead overly promoting group participation.
I hated this in school, where if you needed to find the answer 4, they wanted 2 plus 2. But if you said 6 minus 2, same shit, you just got there a different way. Absolutely not. Creative thinking and problem solving have been baked out of American education. And to me, my ever so humble opinion, those are the 2 most important things to try to teach the children and to teach that next generation coming up, is how to critically think and how to critically problem solve, and how to like, okay, if I do this, then this is going to happen, then this, right? Like a few steps ahead. You don't get that until you're done with a tutorial of life called high school.
turning the classroom into a tool to shape conformity, preparing students to serve a collective, disciplined, and economically productive role in America's ideological fight against communism. A decision that not only cemented consumption as the backbone of American life, but abandoned long-term planning in favor of immediate political and economic gain, placing even further pressure on a generation already being plagued with unrealistic expectations. With American journalist Betsy Fancher stating, "In our efforts to provide all the advantages, we have produced the busiest, most competitive, highly pressured, and over-organized generation of youngsters in history, and probably the unhappiest." Where a 1959 report issued by the federal government, based on classroom observations from educators and visitors, revealed that American school children—
That's in 1962. So the people who are, growing up and going then, they have kids in like their 30s. That's 1992. This is that generation they're talking about of being overly organized, overly, just competitive, and probably the unhappiest. It's my generation.
Children, many in 4th through 6th grade, were already showing signs of deep emotional distress. The report described students as burdened with inner anxieties and in need of security and reassurances from their parents and teachers. Common fears included failing tests, parents becoming sick or unemployed, and more extreme anxieties like being hurt by knives, poison, fire, or holdup. But the most striking phrase used was a pervasive fear of life. Where as a result of the Korean War and rising military tensions, Samuel Witchell, a professor of social studies at Glassboro State College in New Jersey, argued that families' increasing habit of relocation had much to do with children's discontent and growing distrust of authority. The post-war expansion of the economy, construction of interstate highways, and creation of entirely new neighborhoods encouraged Americans to move for better job opportunities. But just as the suburbs failed to offer a lasting sense of place, this newfound mobility caused a deeper feeling of rootlessness, comparing this spatial disorientation to the experience of an immigrant arriving in a foreign country, suggesting it was the foundation for what he called social adjustment problems among
$70 a month buys a 1,200 square foot Florida house complete with 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bath. $70, as you guys can see right there. That, my friends, is insane. Because $70 a month, I pay $1,800, damn near $1,900 a month for about the same square footage and 1 less bedroom and the same bathrooms. Like,
American children, where this was also accompanied by the looming threat of nuclear war, which triggered a surge of studies throughout the 1980s, warning that an entire generation was coming of age with a profound—
How are you, like, I'm getting mad now. How are you supposed to be able to grow an economy that can sustain the inflation of a $70 a month rent to damn near $2,000 a month rent for the same thing? One's a house and one's an apartment, and the apartment is $1,880 more expensive per month than what I have. Then, like, we're not making $1,800, like, percentages from $70 to $1,900. That's a giant jump. Have salaries, the minimum wage, all of that even remotely followed that? Not even close.
Sense of helplessness, with Harvard's Department of Psychology stating, "This fear of nuclear annihilation fostered a sense of having no future, an anxiety that persisted into adulthood, influencing personal decisions like delaying marriage and creating a future generation." In England, the School of Humanities and Social Sciences observed a similar trend, writing, "The threat of nuclear war involves an overwhelming threat to the individual's future, that he or she will have no future, that there is no point in planning for marriage, children, or a career." And according to the Department of Psychology at Illinois, there is also cynicism, sadness, bitterness, and a sense of helplessness. Children perceive that the adult generation is unable or unwilling to halt the arms race, which would only be compounded by the Vietnam War, as it was
Is this for the people who were growing up in the 80s or right now? Literally right now.
transformed from a distant conflict into televised images of body bags, burning villages, and student protests, further dividing the country as 80% of the soldiers who served in Vietnam came from poor working-class families that could not afford college deferment, where the devastating loss of key cultural and revolutionary leaders, the Pentagon Papers, and Watergate resulted in a generation consisting of 76 million individuals who were raised on the promise of American prosperity, only to be shaped by pervasive fear that their own future was entirely out of their control, and a lasting belief that they had been completely robbed of their ability to create a better tomorrow. And while America's guaranteed economic prosperity experienced the dollar losing 53.7% of its value between 1970 and 1980, or 10% more than the loss in value in the last 2 decades, baby boomers gravitated towards a leader who promised to restore order through less government intervention, low taxes, free markets, and deregulation.
Donald Trump.
Promising that the benefits would trickle down to the middle and working class.
Nixon?
With Ronald Reagan's presidency solidifying a lasting ideological shift that redefined prosperity as the result of individual effort rather than collective support, deepening skepticism towards labor unions, social programs, federal regulations, and even fellow Americans, as they were reframed as barriers to growth rather than safeguards for stability, where the inevitable lack of long-term planning throughout the 1950s and 60s left baby boomers entering a labor market that
high food prices eat up our wages while we eat less. Center for United Labor Action. Is this not what's going on right now? Is this not what's going on right now?
Was never built to support them, with a 1983 New York Times article, Baby Boom to Job Bust, highlighting how companies that continued campus recruitment had compounded the oversupply problem by raising their hiring standards. In fields like retail, which had not cut back on college hiring, recruiters found themselves in the enviable position of considering only the top graduates, while simultaneously requiring work experience. Don Franklin, director of executive recruitment for Gimbel's Midwest, noted, "A few years ago, we were happy to find students who had done well academically and were enthusiastic about our company. Now, in addition to good grades, most of my colleagues in retailing are hiring graduates who have had work experience, preferably in this field, and who played a leadership role in extracurricular activities." While Bob Junius, manager of college relations for Continental Bank, added, "In the last few years, more and more graduates, particularly those in liberal arts, tell our recruiters they are willing to be tellers or secretaries if they cannot get into one of our management training programs. We've refused to do that because we suspect they would become frustrated and, as a result, less productive if we couldn't move them into a better job relatively quickly. And we can't guarantee that," causing baby boomers, particularly the younger generation Jones, to simply prioritize career advancement above all else, where the yuppie stereotype.
And now, in today's day and age, it's not about loyalty to a company. If you want a pay raise, if you want to get a raise, don't work harder at your company. Why would you do that? Just go to a new company, work there for a few years, maybe a year, and then transfer back to your old job and get a raise that way and get a better position. Because they're not going to hire internally from a company. No, why would a company hire an employee for a leadership position that's been there for 10 years and has worked their way from the bottom to the top? Why would you do that? Go hire somebody else with leadership experience from another company. They'll go get a leadership. They're qualified. They'll go get it somewhere else. It's like, why would you let that nugget walk out of your front doors? It's so frustrating.
Marked by designer clothing, luxury cars, and an aggressive obsession with climbing the corporate ladder, to become the symbol of a generation told to conform, redirecting their anxieties into productivity and endless material consumption, trading the potential of sustainable and shared growth for the illusion of individual advancement, no matter how fleeting or how unequal.
I don't even have this much debt. I don't even have $6,000. I have about $6,000 worth of debt, right? So if we're looking at this, every person in America, if you divvy up the national debt, has over $100,000. That means your 6-year-old sister, 10-year-old sister, she has $100,000 in debt. She hasn't even done anything yet, and she's already $100K in debt. If we were to break up the national debt today, it's insane. It's insane when you put it this way, because you try your hardest not to get in debt. For me, my biggest debt is my truck, and it is almost paid off. I legitimately probably have less than $6,000 worth of debt now as an individual, but as an American, I'm over $100,000 in debt. How fucked up is that?
Well, the outcome, where despite the 2008 global financial crisis completely altering the trajectory of millennials' careers, and Generation X experiencing the largest net worth decline of any generation, a 2010 Pew Research survey found that 80% of baby boomers were dissatisfied with the direction of the country. By comparison,
this is such a good, comedic piece of art. Your generation is sickening. It's always me, me, me. I need a job. I have multiple degrees. I will take anything. Yet you're the one being selfish. You're the one who's being sickening, even though you were promised if you went to school, you got a college degree, that you would get a job, right? And if you had multiple degrees, that you'd have a great job. But no, you're stuck taking anything, and because of that, you're in a desperate situation. So all people see you is desperate. It's fucked
just
up.
60% of millennials, 69% of Gen Xers,
Super fucked
and
up.
76% of silent and greatest generation adults reported the same. And even more revealing, 21% of boomers believed their standard of living was lower than that of their parents at the same age, compared to just 14% of all non-boomer adults, creating a generational cycle of arguing over who had it worse, rather than channeling any collective effort into actually changing the system.
Who cares
and so
who
what
had
I
it
hope
worse?
that we can
Let's make
begin
the
to
future better.
recognize is that fundamentally we're saying the exact same thing, that this cycle is continuously repeating itself, and it will continue to do so because we're failing to have effective and productive conversations. If our attempt at making things better
love this guy.
is arguing over who had it worse, that's a recipe for disaster. It's
a recipe for who's gonna race to the bottom of the barrel first. We need to get out of this barrel, stop going down, have conversations. Who cares who had it worse, right? We both had it worse. Both generations had it worse. Let's focus on how to make sure that the next generation doesn't have it as bad as us. How about that, huh? And maybe if we can do that, we can benefit from that too. How does that sound?
It's absurd that that is the path we're choosing to go down. But in certain ways, it makes sense because in American culture especially, we have no ability of having conversations, absolutely none. And I think it's because predominantly we like to speak and not listen. And a lot of us, the things that we speak about, we have no idea what we're even talking about. We're regurgitating what we heard from the inflammatory news headlines and
from Asmongold.
The propaganda that we're taught in schools and the biases that are inherited from our parents and all these other aspects.
And he's right on this too, because if you talk to any expert in their field and you question them, no, I've been in this field for 20 years. So if you have an opinion or a thought that is different than mine, then it is obviously wrong, because have you been there? Have you trained for 20 years in this? And no, you haven't. So you don't have a right to say. It's like, come on, man. Sometimes looking at something with a new, fresh pair of eyes gives a new vantage point for something that you've never even thought of before.
At some point, we have to realize that we're just human beings. I don't understand why we look at ourselves as the enemy. Yes, it was hard to enter the labor market throughout the 70s and 80s. The system was not built for the massive population that entered the job market. But it wasn't built for the Gen Xers that entered the highly competitive and global job market that was defined by the dot-com bubble.
Yep.
It was especially not built for the millennials entering the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression to then just be completely left out to dry. And not only that, but blamed for their inability to achieve any sort of financial success. Gen Z, I couldn't even tell you what we're experiencing. It is a complete disaster. Where 500,000 jobs are going to be completely just entry-level jobs are going to be completely gone by AI in the next
year.
2 years.
Honestly, I think 2 years, he's probably right. But even for somebody like me who likes creating content and giving their unsolicited opinions out on the internet, dude, AI is going to be able to do this at such a level I won't even be able to keep up. Right? Like the future is very scary, and people are so focused on their own lives and looking in the mirror and trying and just focusing on that instead of pulling their head out of their ass and looking at the world around them and the community around them and the people that make up their backyard, which is the United States, and not focusing on how do we lift the rising tides up, because it's not rising anymore. Like, we almost have no water left in the port and all the ships are barren. We need water to come in here so we could lift all ships. A rising tide lifts all ships.
That's 2 years. 300,000 American jobs are outsourced every single year.
Yep.
Those aren't things that we talk about because we choose to argue, to do these pointless comments in the comment section, to get upset at your neighbor over these pointless events, than actually do anything of substance. There's no substance. And so I am here as a 25-year-old that I have two goals in my life. And this is
I'm 6 years older than this guy. What he says resonates so much with me.
Primarily been my goals throughout my entire life. I care about the United States. I want to
What
make
a
this place
patriot, man.
just a little bit better than where I found it.
God dang it, this guy's on it.
And I don't know what that means, but I want to make it a better place because
True.
I care about it.
Yep.
I also want to have a family.
Yep.
And so for me,
I also want to have a family. I've been dating the same girl for 10 years, guys. Damn near 10 years. We would love to have a family. And we do well for ourselves. We both have a full-time, well, she has a full-time job now. As of last Thursday, I had a full-time job. And we couldn't do it. There's no way we could have a kid and even have a remotely healthy lifestyle. It would be impossible.
to become a good father at some point, to have kids and hopefully grandchildren, I don't want them to look at me and say, why didn't you do more throughout your time? I don't want them to say, you know, wow, Dad, wow, Grandpa, you lived through the greatest age of American history, because what they're now dealing with is scraps.
Yeah.
Scraps of scraps. I don't want that.
They built it off a box of scraps.
So I am choosing to put my best foot forward
Telling me
to
they're Iron
have
Man?
to say things like in my intro of people are already attacking this
Yeah.
to try and get their attention, just to try to spread this word. I don't care about, the whole generational conflict in these certain aspects. I just want things to be better. I just want people to be a little bit happier, more at peace. I don't want us to be fighting amongst ourselves. The way the United States will fall is if we continue to keep acting like this.
Yeah.
So younger individuals, what we have to do is we can't look at older individuals and first talk about things that we don't understand. We don't know about the intricacies of the Cold War, about
sure.
the impacts of having to continuously move because your father probably is serving in the Korean War. We don't understand about what it's like to.
In all fairness, I moved like every year for the first, up until I was like in 4th or 5th grade. I was in a new place, a new home, a new school every year.
Have a government not know what to do with a massive generation, so it decides to test and begin to manipulate these different aspects of a young person's life. I mean, now we probably are experiencing that, but at least they've been working on it for a while, I guess. And so if we choose to address older individuals just in terms of economic prosperity that they most likely didn't even realize they were experiencing, I doubt the mother of 4 kids was sitting there just thinking, wow, we are living through the greatest age of American capitalism. They were probably focused on the very things they didn't have.
Yeah.
That is a natural part of humanity, especially in American culture where we predominantly have everything we want. And so if we look at them and say, you had everything, look at inflation adjusted numbers, all that's going to do is bring an emotional response, right?
Yeah.
And so what we have to begin to do is understand a little bit more of the bigger picture of, hey, look, in many ways, you guys sold out our future, but also what are we going to do about it? Okay? Because I just want things to get better. I don't really need I'm sorry or anything. I just want things to be better.
Yeah.
Older individuals,
How do we even start
you
this,
got to
though?
learn how to communicate. You can't just keep being emotional and inflammatory over every single thing that questions your established narrative. You have to realize that you have these things.
So much of
set
the established
by
narratives
fear,
have been wrong,
and that just
too.
a little thing that maybe breaks that mold, you're just igniting and erupting. You can't live through the news. The news isn't real. None of this is real. The person in front of you is real.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to speak with them.
Yep.
We need the 20% that controls 50% of wealth to begin to actually do something. And we need to have it happen quick, because if it doesn't, again, none of this is really.
That's actually insane that in America, the top 20% really move 50% of all the wealth in America. And that's what everyone's chasing, to get into that top 20%, really the top 1%. Like, it is a lot. Like, 80% of Americans are just getting paycheck to paycheck. Maybe not even that. Really, it's probably about 60%. And the bottom 20% are just barely making it by in ways that you and I probably can't even comprehend, you know? And the top 20% don't even realize what's going on.
Worth talking about, because the trajectory we're on isn't just going to fix itself. There isn't just some savior out there. There isn't just the next policy. All of that continuously is showing us it isn't going to work.
And what's frustrating is the people who have the wherewithal, probably the gumption, all of that to be great leaders like this guy, understands and could articulate and can communicate, don't want that job. And even if they did, they wouldn't get it.
We have to come together.
It's got to be a sociopath who gets it.
This is the goal that I
want.
For me, I want to have a better United States, and I want to have a family. So I will do everything I can to be able to pursue that direction. Find what it is that you can do. But I guarantee you the biggest change will happen if we can have conversations. So I want to just end us out with this quote that I found throughout my research. I think it's a really great way to be able to conclude. What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders. They disobey their parents. They ignore the laws. They riot in the streets, inflamed with wild notions. Their morals are decaying. What is to become of them? Written by Plato more than 2,300 years ago. And thank you all so much.
Boom! Damn, I nailed that one on the head. I'm so smart.
For your support. I really hope this was able to provide value.
No, I just probably have researched a lot of the same things that he's come across, and that just, like, this is history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And if you really do look at it, it's literally like the same things painted with a different paintbrush and a different texture. And we really do need to be able to learn how to communicate better with each other. We need to learn to have actual, like, just because you disagree with somebody on something, on a topic. I'm going to throw out Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Iran. That is just one thing. And if you're an American like me, it probably has nothing to do with your everyday life. I mean, nothing. Yet we get so passionate on it that we would tell our neighbors, the person directly in front of us, fuck you, I hope you die in a car crash that goes up in a blaze of glory, right? Like, we would tell them that over something that we have no real connection to. And instead, that person, instead of focusing on that one connection that you disagree on, what about all the other things, all the other common grounds that you do agree on? Liking lakes, maybe liking birds, having a dog, liking Call of Duty. Like, there's so many things that we can come together. And even though I'm not giving, crazy examples, there's a lot of small things, and it's the small things in life where you can just like, hey, I like this thing. This thing makes me kind of feel weird. Oh, you like this thing too? Oh, we're both weirdos together. We both, sure, we disagree on this, but we like this together. Like, focus more on that, man.